Hi, MED 624. Sorry for the slight delay with this video. Class number 7. Hope you guys are all doing well. I know some of you have already gone to contest. Those of you that have groups that are going to contest or festival, and some of you are preparing, and some of you don't go until the end of April. So good luck with all that stuff and all of your concerts and all of those things and all those preparations. So today, I'll talk largely about the large ensemble director, and specifically band, orchestra, choir, primarily at the high school level, although a lot of this relates to the middle school level as well. Here at USM, we've gone through a search for a new music ed professor to add to the team. Some of you understand this process. Some of you may not be familiar with it. You have to do a national search for any position that is tenure track. And what does tenure track mean? Someone gets a job, and 5 or 6 years from now, they have to be voted on by their teaching peers. And if they indeed get tenure, then they're promoted to a level of associate professor from assistant professor, get a pay increase. And at that point, removing that professor from the university becomes much more difficult because what you've said is that you have a vote of confidence from the faculty that this person is great, doing a great job, and at this point there's no need to replace them with somebody with different or better skills. So we just finished that search today, so that's kind of exciting. And one of the topics that came up, has come up with every candidate, as it should, is the way that we use our time in the large ensemble. So best practice, based on research, some of it is anecdotal information, things that we have all lived, and our stories of those lived moments. We tend to come up with opinions that we think are indeed true, and sometimes anecdotal evidence is supported by research, and sometimes it's not at all. Quite the opposite. We've talked about some of those things before. So specifically in the large ensemble rehearsal, specifically at the high school level, choir, orchestra, band, although there is overlap for college and middle school, how do you use your rehearsal time, and what are you planning for your student achievement outcomes to be? And we're going to talk in the context of contest a bit. If you're not pro-contest, I think you'll see how this fits very well. If you are pro-contest, this should fit very well. Bottom line is, contest or no contest, we should be, with our large ensembles, building them up to a point where they're going to do live performances, and we want the quality of those live performances to be as good as possible. One, for the audience, but more importantly for our students, so that they have the experience of excellence through music performance. Excuse me. So, very first thing, what does research tells us these rehearsals look like when done by experts, people who have fantastic programs that have been fantastic for a very, very long time, and there's great consensus about the quality of that program. In other words, ask anybody on the street kind of thing. How good is the program at Marcus High School in Flower Mound, Texas? No one's going to argue that it's bad. Some people may argue that they would do it differently, but everybody would say that there's a lot of positive outcomes that are happening out of that school. Stone High School, just outside of Hattiesburg, no one would argue that great things aren't coming out. Someone might say I would do things slightly different, and that's of course their opinion. But a lot of great things that are happening. So these people are experts that have produced high student outcome achievement levels for a long time, and there's a lot of consensus as to the quality of their program. And excuse me, that the teacher is making the largest impact on the program. Research certainly shows us that it doesn't necessarily have to do anything with your budget, your building, the types of students that you teach, whether it's racial or financial background, or even the middle schools that they come from, the programs that they come to as they move into yours. And a lot of us don't want to think or believe that, but that's the case. Research shows us that you can take 2 directors with very, very similar situations, and one is producing a high-performing ensemble, and one's producing a low-performing ensemble. I'm using a lot of terms that we've talked about that are on the lists that I've placed on Blackboard. things like high performing and low performing, rehearsal targets, rehearsal frames, feedback, modeling, and all those sorts of things. So when we study these ensembles over time, how would you break down their day-to-day rehearsal? All of them have much shorter transitional time than their middle and low performing counterparts. In other words, from the time the bell rings and students start entering into class, when you switch from tune to tune or activity to activity, when you pack up instruments at the end of the day, that total amount of time added up is the smallest amount of time that you spend within the day. We all have seen, and maybe some of us are doing this, we stop everything to call roll. We stop everything to make announcements at the start of class or the middle of class or end of class. We halt everything to wax rhapsodic about something that's important to us but may not be important to the students ever. So transition time, setup time, tear down time, whatever you want to call it, is a very, very small percentage of class. A lot of these studies look at that being anywhere from 8% to maybe 12% when you're looking at high performing ensembles with expert teachers. Excuse me, bad allergy day. So here comes the sneeze. My eyes red. Anyhow, so transition time, setup, very small percentage of the day. Next thing, the amount of time that a teacher will talk, whatever that means. They're giving instructions, they're giving feedback, they're modeling, they're giving announcements. Compared to student activities, when the students are talking or the students are asking questions or the students are performing, that in high-performing ensemble rehearsals with expert teachers, that is close to 50-50. And in a lot of cases, it slightly favors student activities over teacher activities. I think in my own studies, for high-performing ensemble directors with expertise, it's always more than 50%. And I think on the high end, some maybe 58-59% of the time is student activities, and the rest is all teacher activities. So that's in common with all high-performing ensembles in the large ensemble setting by expert teachers, that student activities take more time or are given more time, or more time is dedicated toward student activities than director activities. Next thing, when the teacher gives feedback, some researchers, and this is pretty recent, and the line of research goes from a man named Goolsby to a researcher, Marianne Cavett, that then goes to Michael Worthy, that then goes to Mark Waymeyer, that looks at teacher feedback in the large ensemble setting and breaks it down into three types: succinct feedback, explicit feedback, and descriptive/prescriptive feedback. So, an example of succinct feedback: you cut off the ensemble and you go, "Good, let's do it again. That was fine." Or, "Nope, letter A, here we go." And you start again. So, succinct, one word, 2 words, 3 words, 4 words. And in that, I'm not saying what was wrong. I'm not saying what was good. I'm not even identifying what we were rehearsing, whether it's articulation or intonation or phonation, whatever it is. I'm just simply giving quick feedback and moving on. Explicit feedback has 2 components. I'm either saying good or bad, and I don't necessarily have to say those words, but I'm making it very clear that I'm identifying either what it was that wasn't good, what it was that we were actually rehearsing, or I may be simply identifying what I want you to do again, but better. So it's explicit. It's clear why I stopped. It's clear what I'm reinforcing that went well, or what I want you to do so that we fix something. So explicit feedback, you cut off the ensemble and you go, "The articulation was much better. Let's do it again." So explicit, however, I didn't describe how you made it better or what I want you to do this next time, but I was explicit about what it is, the target, what the focus, what the objective was. You cut them off and say, "No, we're still not making it all the way to the end of the crescendo. Bigger breath, less stress on the upper body. Really make that happen and watch me. I'll let you know when we get to the ultimate moment with my gesture or whatever it is. So then descriptive, prescriptive, cut off the ensemble. All right, the balance was much better there. However, sopranos, I'm still getting some really, really intense sounds. Think really, really tall, open up, darker, more round. So let's do that again. Make sure that we're paying attention to the balance, the blend, the overall sound. So you've told the sopranos specifically how to fix sound. In telling them how you want them to fix it, you're also telling them what they're not doing correctly. You're talking about what the objective or the focus is. So descriptive and prescriptive. I'm describing and prescribing either what you need to do to make it as good this time or make it better. So in rehearsals of high-performing ensembles, large ensembles in the high school setting, particularly in college, by expert teachers, what kind of feedback do you think they give the most? The succinct kind, explicit, or descriptive prescriptive? Well, when compared to directors of low-performing ensembles, directors of high-performing ensembles give way more explicit and descriptive prescriptive feedback than their middle-performing or low-performing counterparts. Sometimes as much as 50, if not 100% more. Directors of high-performing ensembles tend to show much larger numbers, much larger numbers, even as many as 3 or 4 times more than their middle and low performing counterparts. In other words, directors of high performing ensembles will give prescriptive and descriptive a lot more than their low performing counterparts, as well as explicit, with succinct being the least amount. They discovered a long time ago, or they read research, or someone has trained them, that cutting off and saying, good, let's move on, does nothing. It does nothing to reinforce what was fixed. And we say the word good or fine or okay so often, it just washes out. Students don't really hear it. We don't get a response from them that's going to create gained intelligence, gained musicianship, or even gained self-efficacy by giving that kind of feedback. So thus far, we have transition time is low. Student activities outnumber teacher activities, and the types of feedback that we give for high-performing groups should be very explicit. We're telling them what was better, why something was better, and or descriptive, prescriptive. We're describing what it was and how to do it again or how to make it better on a next trial. Performance approximations. In my study, specifically comparing high-performing to low-performing band directors in a large ensemble setting, 5 directors over 3 rehearsals per director, so 15 rehearsals total. I'm just pulling this off the top of my head. I believe it was 241 frequency count of performance approximations. Remember, performance approximations are, okay, bam, everybody just sing the rhythm. Don't have to be on pitch, but sing the rhythm in the correct style, starting at letter F. Here we go. So I'm doing something that's not the performance exactly on their instruments, but I'm approximating it in some way. I'm replicating some part of the performance without doing it full-fledged, full-on the instruments. You can do the same thing with choir. Choir, let's just speak through the text here in rhythm. Let's all sing the song La. Let's solfege this whole thing. Strings, we're going to bow in the air and we're going to go under tempo. And I really want you to focus just on whether or not your bow is going the same direction as everybody else. So, performance approximations. In that same study, directors of low-performing ensembles, again, 5 directors, 3 rehearsals per director, add that all up together, 15. There were only, I want to say, 17. The frequency was only 17, and that's every director combined. So if I only saw performance approximations 17 times over 15 rehearsals, it's very possible that someone never did them in the 3 days that I visited them, and some people did them only once a day. So with a huge disparity there between 240 something and only 17, directors of high-performing ensembles, expert teachers, use performance approximations a lot, and a lot more than their middle or low-performing counterparts. Next thing we'll talk about is modeling. Research has shown that modeling is incredibly effective. You know it's effective whether you've read research about modeling or not. And there are two types of modeling, either positive modeling or negative modeling. I don't know why I always go to trombones with this one, but I'm going to go to the trombones with this one. Cut them off. Trombones! It doesn't go... You got to move this slide quicker. You have to coordinate it with the tongue. Let's do it again. We'll be sure to hit this in sectionals this afternoon. So you modeled, but it was negative. It doesn't mean my tone of voice necessarily is negative. I could also have negative modeling in this way. Tenors, when you get to this phrase, mine eyes have seen the glory of. What I'm getting from you is, mine eyes have seen the glory of. It all kind of starts to meld together. So I want you to be a little bit more clear. So I'm not making fun of them. My demeanor was not making fun of them. So both of those cases of negative modeling, in other words, I'm singing, I could be tapping, I could be performing on my own instrument. What I don't want to happen. And then obviously positive modeling, mine eyes have seen the glory of. I'm going to be very, very clear with my pitch, the direction, and the enunciation of all the words. Just like that, please. So a positive modeling, here's what I want it to be, exactly the way I want it to be. You probably can figure out directors of high-performing ensembles that are experts do way more positive modeling than negative modeling. And when they do negative modeling, the number of times that it's I don't want to say demeaning, but it's done in a negative way. My personality is kind of making fun of them. Is very, very, very few times to never does that happen. So in the high-performing ensembles, by and large, way more positive modeling than negative modeling. And positive modeling, when it is sung, which is primarily how we model in band, orchestra, and choir. That's something that all three of those ensembles have in common. Yes, I can pick up my French horn and model, or I can pick up my clarinet and model, I can pick up my bass and model, I can pick up my tuba and model. It's not always easy. It's not easy to pick up a tuba or a bass or whatever and model something. But I can sing almost anything to any of those ensembles and model a sound or direction or articulation or style or dynamics that I want. So singing is the most common form of modeling. And not only do directors of high-performing ensembles do way more positive modeling than negative modeling, they usually sing the right style, the right dynamic inflection. They always try to make music when they model, and they sing on pitch in the correct key, which yes means that male teachers often have to sing in falsetto in front of their groups. They may snicker the first couple of times. They may not. I don't know. If you don't sing for your groups, shame on you. Please sing, and please sing often. And once they get used to it, they won't give it a second thought. Now, them getting used to it may take 3 months. It may take 4 months. It may take 5 months. It depends on how far you are away from singing to them at all. And if you don't sing in rehearsal, and if they don't sing in rehearsal, I would go through a slow process. Maybe the first time you sing to them, you don't sing on pitch, and you sing just the inflection. And then maybe a week from now, you start to sing on pitch. And maybe you don't sing in your falsetto voice if you're a male, or you're in your bass voice if you can, if you're female. You gradually move toward what research shows us is the best way to do that, singing on pitch in the right octave whenever possible, musically with the right dynamics, with the right style, so on and so forth. Certainly, anecdotally, I have found that is hugely successful for my ensembles. All right, let's talk about rehearsal frames and trials and targets. Directors of low-performing ensembles tend to use too many targets within a rehearsal frame. In other words, middle and low-performing directors often would say, okay, flutes, it was too long. Tubas, you're blatting. Percussion, you're not watching. Trumpets, this phrase right here on the F sharp, I need more direction. Same thing on the B natural as you go up to the C. Now make sure the C is not out of tune. As a matter of fact, let's tune that C right now. Here we go. Trumpets go flat, flat, sharp, flat. Directors of low-performing ensembles never check it again. And actually, directors of low-performing bands would go push in, pull out. They wouldn't even say sharp or flat and give the student a chance to start to equate the sounds they're hearing to what flat and sharp really mean. So I just got all this stuff, and I'm still on the same rehearsal frame. The band is sitting. The euphonium's got no feedback. They don't, subconsciously, maybe this next trial is not about them at all. And so then you rehearse that, and you've thrown out a lot of things. And maybe even you've given the flutes 5 things to think about, the low brass 2 things to think about. You tune the trumpets down the line on a C, and then you're going to rehearse this. And what research shows us is that directors of high-performing ensembles will do 1 or 2 targets. They'll be very, very explicit and prescriptive, descriptive about those things even before they play, so that when they give them feedback, the feedback resembles the instruction of those individual targets within the rehearsal frame. Hope that makes sense to you. Last thing I want to talk about is philosophies. A lot of research is emerging. We're starting to do more and more mixed method research that looks not only at either qualitative or quantitative research, but certainly quantitative research that has lots of numbers, statistics, data, numerical data, nominal or ordinal data that has rank. If it's ordinal data, you're simply putting things in order. If it's nominal, based on numbers, and the numbers are important data, they are placed in order, but the place that they are really matters. First place, second place, third place, as opposed to simply putting something in order because of the alphabet. And then interval data, where the space between people becomes very, very important. So the highest test score is a 97, the next test score is an 87, the next test score is an 86, the next is an 85, the next is an 84. So that person that scored the highest score scored 10 points higher, and it looks like everybody else is like only 1 point away from each other. So that interval data becomes very, very important. So my point being, we get information like that, number information, quantitative information from research. But why? Why did the director choose to do that? Why did he or she keep hounding on pitch over and over and over, and it wasn't getting better? I want to know. And so we start to ask questions. And so as we start doing interviews and gathering interview data, and we transcribe all those spoken words in the interview, and we start doing something called coding, which means we're starting to look for emergent themes. In other words, of these 50 choir directors, when asked why they tuned chords this way, what were the emergent themes? What came up the most often with a population that large, with that many people that I'm interviewing? What seemed to be the most important thing, or the reoccurring, the emergent things that are emerging out of the data that make me want to pay attention to what's being said? So overwhelmingly, once you collect the quantitative data for directors of high-performing ensembles, and you sit down and you talk to them specifically about their philosophies, overwhelmingly, in my study, it was 100% directors of high-performing ensembles talked about the reason we make music, the reason we teach music, the reason we need music in our schools is for music-centric reasons. It's part of what it means to be human. It's part of what it means to be an expressive human. It's part of the human species that no other species shares. It's part of expressing outwardly and inwardly. It affects us emotionally. It affects our brain. Doesn't make us smarter. Careful. But it affects our brain. We put EKG. We do brainwave analysis. Neuroscience shows that all these things are happening in our brains in a very, very different way when exposed to music as opposed to anything else. Again, because our brain is reacting differently than when someone's reading a speech to us, or we're reading a book, or we simply hear an air conditioning running in the background. Doesn't mean that our brain is smarter, but it does mean that brain affects us differently, and so we keep desperately searching that, looking at that research to see what it all means. We've done brainwave analysis on animals and seen that quite often there's no difference, which I think points out even more how music affects the human species more than any other, and is reason for teaching it, keeping it in our schools as part of being human, as much as eating or seeking shelter or procreation or forming relationships. Animals do those for very, very different reasons than the human species does. There's a low-performing ensembles talked primarily a lot and even passionately about band is a great place to learn teamwork. Band is the best place for kids to feel a home away from home. Band, choir, orchestra is the best place for my kids to learn how to multitask. We got to be careful. We can't say the best place. Maybe the best place for every kid is different. Maybe the best place isn't band, orchestra, or choir to learn how to multitask. Maybe the best place for someone to feel home away from home is not in your band room. Maybe it's a choir room, and maybe if you keep preaching that, you'll lose your kid from band to choir, or from choir to theater, or from theater to baseball, or from baseball to the chess club. There's a lot of fear in the music ed collegiate world that we keep pounding this, and what we're really saying is music's not important for music's sake. Music's important for these ancillary, these extra, these outside things. And research shows that directors of low-performing ensembles talk about those things much, much, much more than music-centric things. Music for music's sake, music for music-making sake, music for what it offers us that nothing else can offer. If chess can offer teamwork and team building and self-esteem, then great. I can go buy a chess, or I can probably get one donated. I probably can go lots of places and get chess sets donated and it not cost the school district anything. When's the last time you ordered a sousaphone? When's the last time you brought 300 kids on a bus to state marching contests? These things are expensive. Music is expensive. Choir the least, probably band next, and then probably orchestra the most expensive, unless you've got a huge marching band program that you pour money into, lots and lots of money into. Cellos are expensive, basses are expensive. So certainly something to think about. So just want to point out some things that research shows about the large ensemble setting and what experts do in those large ensemble settings. A lot of research out there. I hope some of you are looking at this research and that your final project will be based on this kind of research, because it's what you do every day. And I think it's very important that you take what you're learning in class, and if certainly those of you that are teachers out in the field, that you use this and it really makes a difference in your own teaching. So anyhow, I will make a list of a few terms, although I don't think there are very many that we talked about today that have not been put on Blackboard before. Hope you're all doing well, school's going well, your personal lives are going well, families and all that kind of stuff. We're recovering more and more from the tornado, and have Sweeney Todd that's being performed this week. It won't be the full stage production, which is what we had planned to do, and it would have been fantastic. I was excited to see the full thing. We are going to do a concert version in costume this week at the Singer. Students seem to be doing well in our temporary area of campus that we call Twister Town, and Music Ed has offices in the library on campus as well as in Twister Town because of trying to meet our students' needs and then walking across campus. Our students say that they're losing a lot of weight, or more weight. I shouldn't say a lot of weight. More weight, burning more calories than they did before because of how much walking they're having to do. But anyhow, there's my quick update on Twister Town. Hope you're doing well. Take care.